I opened my dream business and invited my family to the grand opening, and no one showed up. Instead they chose to go to my brother Kent's house. My name is Samantha Hayes, I'm 32 years old, and this is the story of how I built my dream studio, lost my family, and found something better in the process. The recording studio had been my obsession for 5 years before it became real. Every weekend was spent hunting for the perfect location in Nashville's evolving East End. Every night I drafted business plans until my eyes burned. Every spare dollar went toward equipment I stored in my apartment until the neighbors complained about the weight threatening their ceilings. When I finally signed the lease on that brick building with the arched windows and creaking floors, I knew it was everything. The bank account I'd built slowly through years of sound engineering gigs for ungrateful artists was nearly empty, but Soundframe Studios was born. My chance to create the kind of recording space that respected musicians as artists, not commodities. The name, Soundframe, came from something my father once said when I was 12. Samantha, you don't just hear music, you see its framework. It was the only time I remember him acknowledging my passion without adding, but at the end. My whole life, I'd been the responsible daughter. The one who showed up for every family emergency, who loaned money I rarely got back, who adjusted my schedule when my sister Diane needed childcare, or my brother Kent needed a ride after losing his license. Again. I was the family safety net, always catching their falls while nobody noticed I was balancing on my own high wire. Sam, I need to borrow $2,000, Kent had said just 6 months before my studio opening. We were sitting at our parents' dining table during Sunday dinner, his voice low so the others wouldn't hear. What for this time? I asked, cutting my pot roast. Legal fees. The DUI thing is more complicated than I thought. I set down my fork. That's the 3rd time you've asked for money this year. Come on, you know I'm good for it. Once my band takes off. Your band that's changed members 4 times this year. I raised an eyebrow. This lineup is solid. We've got prospects. I just need to get past this legal hurdle. His eyes pleaded with me in that way that always worked. Sam, you're the only one I can count on. And I'd written the check. Just like always. When the construction on Soundframe was finished, when the sound panels were installed and the mixing boards calibrated, when the framed records lined the walls and the coffee machine was loaded with the good beans, I sent invitations to my entire family for the grand opening. I'd reserved 7 spots just for them, Mom and Dad, my sisters Diane and Rachel, my brother Kent, and my aunts who'd helped raise us after Mom's depression hit. I even hired a local chef to cater, specifically ordering my father's favorite bourbon chicken and my mother's preferred wine. The RSVPs came quickly. Wouldn't miss it, texted Rachel. So proud, wrote Mom. Put me down for 2, said Kent, presumably bringing his new girlfriend. I'd believed them because I'd never given them a reason not to trust me, so why wouldn't I extend the same courtesy? The morning of the opening, I woke early despite having worked until 3 a.m. perfecting the lighting. This day represented everything: validation, independence, proof that choosing music over the teaching career my parents had pushed hadn't been the dead-end path my father predicted. By noon, everything was ready. The caterers arrived at 4 p.m. The first guests, local musicians and potential clients, arrived at 6 p.m. This place is incredible, Sam, said Marcus, a guitarist I'd worked with for years. The acoustics in that main room are perfect. Thank you, I beamed, checking my watch. 6:30 p.m., no sign of my family yet. By 7 p.m., the studio was filling with Nashville's indie scene, producers I'd worked with, and friends who'd listened to my dreams for years. But the 7 reserved seats remained empty. No texts. No calls. Not even a running late message. At 8:30 p.m., when I was explaining our analog recording options to a promising folk trio, my phone finally buzzed. A single message from my sister Rachel: sorry, got caught up at Kent's housewarming thing. He bought that condo finally. Everyone's here celebrating. Join later if you're done. Attached was a photo. My entire family, glasses raised, crowded around my brother Kent in his new condo that our parents had helped finance. The condo he'd bought after 3 failed business attempts, and a DUI that I'd paid the lawyer for. The condo celebration they'd apparently decided was more important than the business I'd sacrificed everything to build. I locked my phone, smiled at the musicians, and continued my explanation about vintage microphones as if my chest wasn't collapsing inward. But something had broken permanently. The realization wasn't just that they hadn't come, it was that they had actively chosen something else. Something easier, more familiar, and centered around the family member who took rather than gave. When the last guest left around midnight, I sat alone in my perfect studio, surrounded by empty catering trays, and the 7 vacant seats I'd reserved. I'd labeled each one with their names, handwritten on cards I'd specially ordered. There was something so profoundly humiliating about those empty chairs that I gathered each card, and fed them one by one into the shredder. My phone buzzed again. "Dad, we need to talk about this studio venture." "Concerned about finances." "Not sorry we missed your opening." "Not how did it go." "Just concern about money," likely his planned speech about why I should have chosen a safer path. The same speech he'd given when I turned down the teaching job at my old high school. I didn't respond. Instead, I took a photo of the empty chairs and posted it to my private Instagram with a simple caption: "When you finally realize your value isn't recognized by those who should see it most clearly." By morning, friends were outraged on my behalf. My post had struck a nerve with others who'd experienced family dismissal. One comment hit particularly hard: "The people who benefit most from your stability will resist your growth most fiercely." 3 days passed. My family acted as if nothing had happened. Mom texted about Sunday dinner. Rachel asked if I could watch her kids next weekend. No apologies. No acknowledgement. I decided then that Soundframe Studios would operate on new principles. I established clear boundaries: no family discounts, no casual drop-ins, no using the space for their own purposes. If they wanted access to what I'd built, they would need to respect it professionally like anyone else. The first test came faster than expected. Kent showed up unannounced one afternoon, while I was recording with a jazz quartet. "Hey sis, place looks great," he said, walking in like he owned it, interrupting the session. "Listen, my band needs practice space this weekend. That back room would be perfect." The old Samantha would have accommodated him, rearranged my schedule, canceled paying clients if necessary. The new Samantha didn't. "You need to schedule studio time like everyone else," I said. "And pay the standard rate." His face registered genuine shock. "Are you serious?" "It's just a few hours." "I'm building a business, not a charity," I replied. "And you have a history of just a few hours turning into permanent arrangements." "This is about the opening, isn't it?" he said, lowering his voice. "We didn't think it was that big a deal. It was just a soft opening, right?" The musicians in the booth were watching through the glass, trying to pretend they weren't listening. "It was the culmination of 5 years' work and my entire savings," I answered. "But you're right, it wasn't a big deal to you. And that's exactly why my business isn't available to you now." Kent's face flushed. "You've changed, Sam." "Yes," I nodded. "I have." After he left, I felt the familiar guilt rising, the lifetime of conditioning that made me believe setting boundaries was selfish, especially as a woman in a family that expected female members to be the perpetual caregivers. But I pushed through it. Something had fundamentally shifted. I wasn't angry, I was awake. That awakening proved timely. 2 weeks later, while reviewing the studio's new bookings, I noticed something strange. 3 sudden cancellations, all citing the same reason: they'd heard the equipment was substandard. This was demonstrably false. I'd invested in top-tier gear, some of it rare vintage pieces sought after by serious producers. Then came the online reviews. 3 one-star ratings on Google from names I didn't recognize, all mentioning unprofessional management and outdated equipment. One specifically referenced the owner's attitude problem and hinted that a woman-owned studio might not understand certain technical requirements. I stared at my laptop screen, reading each review again, a cold feeling spreading through my chest. This wasn't coincidence. This was coordinated. My phone rang. It was Lena, Kent's girlfriend. We'd only met twice, but she'd seemed sympathetic when Kent complained about my attitude. "Samantha. It's Lena. I think you should know something." "What is it?" I asked, already suspecting. "You should know they're talking about ways to make you reconsider your attitude. Your dad thinks you're being emotional about the studio and need to come back to reality." I gripped the phone tighter. "They who, exactly?" A pause. "Your dad, Kent. They've been discussing how to make you see that this studio thing is too risky. That you should go back to your old job, be more available to the family." "And the reviews? The cancellations?" Another pause. "I'm not saying they're behind it. But Kent was on the phone with your dad last night, laughing about how a few bad reviews might humble her." It was almost impressive, the coordinated effort to damage what I'd built rather than simply apologize for missing the opening. The subtext was clear: fall back in line or suffer the consequences. The added layer of dismissing my business decisions as emotional only confirmed what I'd always suspected: my ambition made them uncomfortable in ways my brothers never did. "Thanks for telling me," I said finally. "I'm sorry," Lena replied. "It's not right what they're doing." I could have confronted them. Started a family war. Instead, I chose something more powerful: strategic success. First, I contacted every client who'd ever recorded at Soundframe and offered them a special rate on their next session in exchange for honest reviews. Within days, the fake reviews were buried under dozens of authentic 5-star ratings from actual musicians. "The vintage Neumann mics at Soundframe capture vocal warmth like nowhere else in Nashville," wrote a respected folk singer. "Samantha Hayes engineers sound that major labels envy," posted a jazz pianist who'd recorded his EP with me. Second, I reached out to a music journalist who'd shown interest in the studio's vintage equipment collection. The resulting feature in Sound and Recording magazine highlighted not just the gear, but my philosophy of creating an artist-centered space. The piece ended with a pointed paragraph about building something meaningful, despite lacking traditional support systems, and included a sidebar about women changing Nashville's recording industry. Third, I invited 3 emerging bands with significant local followings to record EP showcases at reduced rates. Their social media coverage provided the kind of authentic marketing money couldn't buy. "Recording at Soundframe Studios was life-changing," posted the lead singer of the Hollow Beats to her 50,000 followers. "Sam Hayes understands artists like no other producer in Nashville." The response was immediate. Bookings doubled. Industry professionals started making appointments. 2 recognized Nashville producers inquired about partnership opportunities. Meanwhile, my family's reaction evolved from irritation to alarm. The Sunday dinners I no longer attended apparently became strategy sessions. My cousin Jamie, always the family outlier, reported that my father was particularly disturbed by my sudden independence. He'd apparently said, "Sam needs to remember where she comes from before she gets too big for her britches." I found it revealing, the idea that success on my own terms was somehow a betrayal. That standing on my own without seeking their approval was interpreted as arrogance rather than growth. The undertones were clear: my place as a daughter was to remain accessible, supportive, and secondary to my brother's ambitions. For months after the opening, my father finally appeared at the studio. He didn't call first. He simply arrived during a rare quiet afternoon, when I was handling administrative work. "We need to talk, sweetheart," he said, settling uninvited into the chair opposite my desk. He looked around, nodding with reluctant approval at what I'd built. Your mother's upset. Everyone is. This silent treatment isn't like you. I'm not being silent, I replied. I'm being selective about where I invest my energy. He sighed the way he always did when preparing to deliver wisdom from on high. Look, we missed one event. It wasn't intentional. Kent's thing just happened to fall on the same day, and you know how hard he's been trying to get his life together. It wasn't just one event, I said quietly. It was the only time I've ever asked anything of this family after a lifetime of being there for everyone else. And it wasn't a scheduling conflict, it was a choice. That's dramatic, he scoffed. We're family. We don't keep score. Except you do, I countered. You score every decision I make against your expectations. The difference now is that I'm no longer playing that game. His expression hardened. Your brother and sisters think you've changed. Become difficult. Interesting choice of words, I said. I've been bankrolling Kent's mistakes for years. I've been Diane's emergency childcare since her kids were born. I paid for Rachel's car repairs last year. What exactly have they done for me? The question hung in the air, unanswered because we both knew the truth. Your mother and I want to help with the studio, he finally said, changing tactics. Provide some financial backing. Help you expand. And there it was, the real purpose of his visit. Not reconciliation but reclamation. Money as the tool to regain control. The studio is profitable, I said, sliding a folder across the desk. These are the first quarter earnings. We're booked solid for the next 2 months, and I've just signed a contract with Blackbird Records to handle their new artists' recordings. My father glanced at the numbers, his eyebrows rising slightly. This is better than expected, he admitted. But additional capital could accelerate growth. At what cost? I asked. Because we both know your investments come with conditions. He didn't deny it. Instead, he leaned forward, voice lowered as if sharing a confidence. Kent and his friends have been talking about starting a podcast network. If you partnered with him, combined resources. I actually laughed. So that's the plan. Use my studio to launch Kent's next failed venture. He's your brother, my father said sharply. Family supports family. Exactly, I replied. Which is why 7 empty chairs at my opening told me everything I needed to know about our definition of support. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. You've always been stubborn, Samantha. But this attitude, this isn't you. That's where you're wrong, Dad. This is exactly who I am when I'm not compromising for everyone else's comfort. Your mother will be heartbroken. Because I'm succeeding on my own terms. Because you're shutting out your family. He raised his voice, something he rarely did. I remained seated, my voice steady. I'm not shutting anyone out. I'm establishing professional boundaries. There's a difference. This isn't over, he said, heading for the door. We're family. You can't just erase us because of one missed event. I don't want to erase you, I said as he reached for the doorknob. I just want the same respect you'd give any other business owner. After he left, promising this conversation wasn't over, I made 3 decisive moves. First, I formalized the studio's policies in writing. All clients, regardless of relation, would adhere to the same professional standards and payment requirements. Family would receive no special treatment, positive or negative. Second, I hired security cameras for the building after finding Kent's girlfriend suspiciously parked outside one evening, taking photos of clients entering and leaving. Third, I expanded my vision. The building next door, a former photography studio, had been vacant for months. I contacted the landlord and secured a lease option to potentially double Soundframe's footprint. The family pushback intensified. Rumors circulated among mutual acquaintances that I was difficult to work with and overcharging. My mother sent increasingly guilt-laden messages about my absence from family functions. Kent, most surprisingly, attempted reconciliation, offering to promote the studio through his social media channels as a favor. "I just want to support what you're doing," he said during an unexpected visit. "Your studio, my social reach, it makes sense." "Your social reach?" I repeated, looking up from the mixing board where I was preparing for an afternoon session. "I've got nearly 15,000 followers now," he said proudly. "Most of them musicians or music fans. Perfect demographic for Soundframe." I studied him, trying to see if he genuinely believed this was helpful, or if there was another angle. "And what would you want in return for this favor?" His smile faltered slightly. "Well, nothing specific. Though if you could maybe set aside the back room 2 nights a week for our band practice." "So, not actually a favor," I said. "A business arrangement. Where I provide space worth thousands in rental fees in exchange for a few social media posts." "You're making it sound so transactional," he complained. "We're family." "Exactly," I agreed. "Which is why you should want to support my business without expecting anything in return. The way I supported your legal fees, your car payments, your equipment purchases, all without asking for anything back." He shifted uncomfortably. "That's different." "Yes," I nodded. "It is. Because I gave freely, and you're trying to negotiate." The conversation ended with Kent storming out, muttering about how I'd changed and become all business. What he failed to see was that I'd always been business-minded. I'd just previously directed that energy toward solving everyone else's problems instead of building my own success. I maintained my course. The studio thrived despite their efforts, perhaps even because of them. Each attempted sabotage only reinforced my commitment to building something that couldn't be undermined by their disapproval. The turning point came unexpectedly. A prominent country artist, someone whose posters had hung on my teenage bedroom walls, booked a week of studio time. His producer had heard about our analog equipment and acoustic perfection. The sessions were scheduled, contracts signed. 2 days before recording was to begin, Kent showed up at the studio again. This time, he brought coffee and donuts, a peace offering. "These are from Barista Parlor," he said, setting down the bakery box. "Your favorite." "Thanks," I said cautiously. "What's up?" He perched on the edge of the sofa in the lobby, trying to appear casual. "So, word is Hank Williams Jr. is recording here next week." I sipped my coffee, saying nothing. "Is it true?" Kent pressed. "You know I don't discuss client bookings." "Come on, Sam. It's me. I'm not asking as some random person. I'm asking as your brother." I set down my cup. "What do you want, Kent?" "I need to be here for that," he said, dropping all pretense. "My band, we could open for him someday. This is my chance to make connections." The request was so audacious it momentarily left me speechless. After months of undercutting my business, they now wanted access to the opportunities it created. "No," I said simply. Kent's face reddened. "You don't get it. This isn't just about you. This could be my big break." "Your big break would have been supporting your sister's business from the beginning," I replied. "Not trying to sabotage it and then demanding benefits." "That's not fair," he protested. "Those reviews weren't." He stopped abruptly, realizing his mistake. "Weren't what?" I asked quietly. "Weren't supposed to be traced back to you. Weren't meant to actually damage my reputation. Weren't your idea, just Dad's." Kent stood up, coffee forgotten. "You know what? Forget it. I was trying to be nice, but you're impossible now. Success has changed you." "No," I corrected him. "Betrayal changed me." Success just gave me the freedom to stop pretending it didn't matter. The recording session with the country star was transformative for Soundframe. His social media posts about the studio's unmatched sound quality and my producer's ear generated industry attention I couldn't have bought with any marketing budget. "I've recorded in studios across the country," he told me on the final day, "but there's something special about what you've built here, Sam. It's not just the equipment or the acoustics, it's the atmosphere. Artists feel respected here." As word spread, a journalist from the Nashville scene contacted me about featuring Soundframe in their annual Music City Innovators issue. During the interview, she inevitably asked about my background and family. "I understand your father is Richard Hayes of Hayes Construction. Did his business acumen influence your approach?" It was the perfect opportunity for grievance airing, for public revenge. Instead, I chose power through restraint. "My path has been my own," I said simply. "Soundframe represents my personal vision for what artists deserve." The article, when published, focused entirely on the studio's merits and my technical expertise. It also highlighted something I hadn't expected: my position as one of the few female studio owners in Nashville. Hayes has shattered expectations in an industry where women are typically relegated to vocal booths rather than control rooms, the journalist wrote. The absence of family references spoke volumes to those who knew to listen. 1 year after the opening, and those 7 empty chairs, I signed the lease on the building next door. Soundframe would expand to include a small performance space, allowing artists to showcase the music they recorded with us. The night before the expansion announcement, I received a text from my sister Rachel: "Family dinner Sunday. Important news about Kent." Everyone expected. I didn't respond. I had a business to run. The expansion announcement generated substantial local press. The Nashville Business Journal ran a feature highlighting my journey from freelance sound engineer to studio owner. A photo of me standing in the new space accompanied the article, showing the architectural plans for what would become Soundframe Live. That evening, my phone rang repeatedly. My mother. My father. Both sisters. I let each call go to voicemail, focusing instead on finalizing details with the contractors. Around 9 p.m., there was a knock at the studio door. Through the security camera, I saw my entire family standing outside: parents, siblings, even the aunts. Their expressions ranged from determined to uncomfortable. I considered not answering. But something in me wanted this final confrontation, this opportunity to stand in my power before people who had never truly seen me. They filed in silently, taking in the space many were seeing for the first time despite it being open for a year. My mother looked ready to cry. My father's face was unreadable. "Congratulations on the expansion," Rachel finally said, breaking the silence. "We saw the article." "Thank you," I replied, not making it easier for them. "We came to apologize," my mother blurted suddenly. "For missing your opening. For everything after. We were wrong." I studied her face, searching for sincerity versus expediency. "What specifically are you apologizing for?" The question clearly caught them off guard. They'd expected either immediate forgiveness or angry rejection, not calm inquiry. "For not being there when it mattered," my father said stiffly. "For not recognizing what you were building." "And the reviews?" I asked, looking directly at Kent. "The attempts to undermine my business rather than simply respect my boundaries." Uncomfortable glances were exchanged. Kent stared at the floor. "We behaved poorly," my father admitted. "Out of habit, I suppose. You've always been the steady one. The responsible one. When that changed, when you started prioritizing yourself, we reacted badly." It was perhaps the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. "Kent's starting a podcast network," my sister Diane added quickly. "We thought maybe, with your expansion, there might be room for collaboration now." And there it was. The apology came with strings attached, with expectations. Nothing had really changed except their approach. "I'm not interested in collaboration," I said quietly. "Not anymore. But I do accept your apology." The relief on their faces was palpable. "However," I continued, "acceptance doesn't mean returning to old patterns. My boundaries remain. This business, what I've built, operates on respect. Nothing less." My mother stepped forward hesitantly. "Can we at least come to Sunday dinner again? Your chair has been empty for months." I thought about those 7 empty chairs from my opening night. The symmetry wasn't lost on me. "I'll come to major family events," I said. "But my focus is here now. This is what I've built, and it needs my attention." "That's it?" Kent asked, incredulous. "That's all we get?" We apologized. "And I accepted," I replied calmly. "But apologies don't erase consequences. Trust is rebuilt slowly." They left shortly after, the reconciliation they'd imagined clearly different from the reality I offered. Not rejection, but not the unconditional welcome they'd expected either. As I locked the door behind them, I felt no triumph, no vindictive satisfaction. Just clarity. The empty chairs at my opening had revealed a truth I needed to see, that sometimes family is defined not by blood but by who shows up when it matters. 2 years later, Soundframe Studios and Soundframe Live became Nashville fixtures. Artists who recorded with us regularly performed in our intimate showcase space. We expanded again, adding a small label imprint for independent musicians who embodied our ethos. "You've created something remarkable here," said Marcus, the guitarist who'd been at my opening night, now a regular client and friend. "Everyone in town is talking about Soundframe's artist-first approach." My family and I reached a different equilibrium. Not the enmeshed, boundary-less relationship of before, but not estrangement either. They came to showcases occasionally. I attended major family events. We existed in a new reality where my independence wasn't negotiable. One Sunday, after a particularly successful showcase featuring 3 bands we'd recorded, my father approached me at the bar. "I was wrong," he said without preamble. "About the studio. About your choices." I looked at him, surprised by the naked admission. "The way you run this place," he continued, "the respect you've earned in the industry, it's impressive, Samantha. I didn't see it before because I was too busy trying to make you fit into what I thought was the right path." "Thank you," I said simply. Kent's podcast network failed, he added after a moment. 3 months in. Another expensive lesson. I nodded, unsurprised but not gloating. "The difference is," my father said thoughtfully, "you built something that serves others." He wanted something that served himself. I should have seen that distinction sooner. The most meaningful moment came not from my family, but from a young female sound engineer who approached me after that same showcase. "I've been following Soundframe since you opened," she said, her eyes bright with admiration. "Not just the music you produce, but how you built it. Everyone said a woman couldn't create a studio that prioritized artists over profits. You proved them wrong." "It wasn't easy," I admitted. "That's what makes it inspiring," she replied. "You showed that sometimes you have to stand alone to build something worth having." Standing in the space I'd created, the space no one had shown up to celebrate, I realized the empty chairs had actually been the first step toward something better. Sometimes the deepest betrayals lead to the most authentic victories. Sometimes the people who should be there for you aren't, and that painful truth sets you free to build a life where only those who truly value you get reserved seats. The studio that no one came to see open had become the place everyone wanted to be. And in the end, that was the sweetest revenge of all, not destroying my family, but building myself into someone who no longer needed their approval to succeed. Those 7 empty chairs taught me that sometimes, the greatest act of self-respect is to stop saving seats for people who never planned to show up. If you've ever been let down by the people who were supposed to be there for you, hit that like button right now. If you're still watching, you know what it's like when someone's actions show you exactly where you stand in their lives. Don't be like my family and leave this video without showing support. The truth is, I share these painful moments because I know I'm not alone, and neither are you. Your comment below could be exactly what someone else needs to read to find the courage to stand up for themselves. This channel only grows when people like you decide my stories matter enough to subscribe. So if this resonated with you at all, don't just watch and leave. Don't be another empty chair in my life. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and be part of a community that shows up when it matters. Because unlike my family, I know you understand the importance of being there when someone needs you. Prove me right in the comments below.